So we'll start with the session now. Good morning and warm greetings to one and all. I, Architect Prabchandri, the moderator of today's lecture, take this opportunity to welcome you all to the annual lecture series 2021 from MSAJA. On behalf of Muhammad Sattar AJ Academy of Architecture, I welcome our Dean and Advisor, Professor Muhammad Harris, our Principal, Professor Muhammad Idris, our HOD and Convener, Professor Satish Kumar, our Design Chair, Professor Abdul Samad, fellow architects, faculty members, and students. This annual lecture series allows us to meet some of the inspired minds in our architectural fraternity, which paves the platform for knowledge sharing and enlighten the young minds. With those words, let me introduce and welcome the speaker of today's lecture, Architect Kritika. It is indeed my great pleasure to welcome among us the alumni of this institution, a moment of pride and happiness. To give a brief introduction about Architect Kritika, an alumni of MSAJA, an environmentally cognizant person trained in institutes like Auroville, Laurie Baker Center, the co-founder of the firm, Designing the Dimensions DTD Studio, which stands on one basic principle, sustainable and eco-friendly architecture that helps in reducing the carbon footprint of a building. The firm's idea of sustainability and their concept of eco-friendly ethos and compliance are evidently seen in their projects, which showcase the rammed earthen walls, the stabilized blocks, pillar slabs, madras terrace roofs, mud roofs, Athangudi tiles, and the list goes on. They believe originality is being close to the origins and creativity is conforming to the context. Thank you, Architect Kritika, for accepting our invitation and coming over for the webinar. The schedule of the webinar will focus on the topic of sustainable construction, technological practice that involves the effective utilization of local manpower and locally available renewable resources in the construction, and on alternative technologies and identity of sustainable construction. Please reserve your questions to be asked at the end of the presentation or put in the chat window, which will be answered at the end of presentation. Without any further delay, I spotlight Architect Kritika to start with the presentation. Thank you. Yeah, the screen is yours, Kritika. You may start. Kritika, you're on mute, Kritika.
Can you hear me, ma'am, now?
Yes, you may start.
Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot. I'm very glad being here. This is like a wonderful opportunity for me to express myself as well as showcase like how well, the institution has helped me to grow to this phase. Thanks a lot to all the professors who've been there for us in our batch. Thanks a lot. I take this moment, to express my gratitude. So, yes, so we'll talk about sustainable architecture and what kind of experience we've been taking through for the last 2 years. So it's more over about regional architecture and how the relationship between the man and his environment along with the social practices go in together. So we are actually as a team looking into eco-friendly architecture on a holistic purpose. It involves all the decision making part in the architecture as well as choice of materials and the planning part. So before getting into sustainable construction, I have a few images to be shown. Like we've always been looking at the materials from a perspective from where it is not taken. So these are the images from where it has been mined. So this can actually show lots of, it can actually tell lots of stories behind it. So the kind of hazard that today's mining practices take place. So we talk about pollution to a greater extent in the world. The construction industry takes a major role, to be a part of the all kind of pollution, be it air pollution, land pollution, water pollution. So these are the images that represents the mining process and the background story of from where the construction materials are actually coming from. So there are small point that we will have to look into this when we talk about mining. when the resource of a particular land is being scraped out, it cannot go back to its original ecology. The environmental, assessment principles and the policies talks about, taking back the mining sites to its original condition, which is not possible once the mineral is out. So these are few examples of how, when the mineral is being scraped out, and the kind of condition that it leaves back to the ecology. So I also wanted to talk about a very simple material, cement, so which is completely used everywhere in today's construction practice. So we actually look at cement, as a binder, but then there's more story behind it. To manufacture a bag of cement, you need lots of electricity. So the raw material for cement is again limestone, and the limestone is again various process to get. And for every bag of cement, you need around 20 to 25 liters of fresh water if it is a wet process, and being manufactured a dry process, you need lots of electricity. So it is that way. So, and thermal power plants to be supported with coal, and the list goes on. So when lots of resources are going into getting a material manufactured, how long does cement actually retain on this planet? How long does a concrete building actually stand? The lifespan is being degraded very fastly, and there's only around 60 to 65 years of lifespan given to a concrete building. So there is also lots of principles behind it, like the amount of lime content in a cement bag, and goes on. So just to put it to say that we're spending so much of resources for a building that's going to get demolished in the next 60 years. So I have another question. So now Tamil Nadu has been into single-use plastic ban. We're talking about reduction of plastic, or avoiding materials that are not degradable. Is concrete even degradable? Are we even looking it from that perspective? Does concrete return back to the earth? So what about the land pollution? Major portion of land pollution is from concrete, and it is highly not degradable because of the extensive change in the properties of the materials that goes into it, be it steel or cement or the other aggregates into it. So that's one important question that I would like to ask ourselves, before we choose the materials. So when we talk about, okay, so there are lots of problems, I understand, and there are lots of resources that are getting degraded in conventional practice. Aren't there any alternatives which can become a mainstream in today's practice? Yes, there are practice. Let's also understand that cement on manufactured materials was introduced to us only after Industrial Revolution, when people wanted to accelerate the construction process. Before which there were materials which was taken from the local context, and which was used for construction. One such is lime. So what difference does it make to have lime and cement? Both of them are going to have similar raw materials. The only thing is the process of lime and cement is different. So it's basically calcium carbonate. So nothing to get into chemical reactions, but yes, the lime returned back to the earth after its lifetime. So it to also say that why is it returning back? Because we take limestone in the form of calcium carbonate, and once the lime is being plastered or used as a mortar on the building, it tends to take the carbon dioxide from the air and becomes the same calcium carbonate from which it is originally taken. So it becomes a fossil of limestone. So that is the reason why the material lime is much better and leaves much less waste comparatively to that of cement. So and also to talk about a small comparison of cement and lime. From around 800 to 850 kg of limestone, we get less than 128 to 130 kg of cement. The rest is sludge, it's a waste, and because it's processed already at a very high temperature. Whereas in case of limestone getting into lime, there's less than 0.5% of waste. So that is also one of the reasons why we are using very less resources comparatively, and the flexibility and the plasticity of lime is really high. So the usage of lime can be extensively high compared to cement. So as I said, we're talking about regional architecture. So it also is very important to understand where the material is from. So we cannot say all the buildings in and around Tamil Nadu are out of lime. No. When people get lime, they use the lime. When people get earth, that is soil, they use soil for plastering. So it also depends upon the context, the climate, the wind patterns there. For example, there are two images in this slide, and you can see pantile being laid at two different positions. They are the same kind of pantiles which are laid completely different according to the climate. So this shows the kind of rainfall pattern that each village has, and also the kind of slope that they need, and also about the interlocking of pantiles that was done. So there are examples how materials keep varying according to the context and how people evolved accordingly. So this is another example how the same mountain grass, it's called mountain grass, or in Tamil it's called manjampul, or they call korapul. They grow on mountains, they grow on lakes as well. The ones that grow on lakes is completely different, but of same species. So you can see how completely different they are. They've been woven and laid. So this is another example to talk about how materials and how the skill sets of people vary accordingly. So these are few examples of courtyards. So we actually look courtyards from a point where it is always in the center of a building, or where we don't look at the unique character of the courtyard. But we have 4 different courtyards. The first one, which is at Udayalur, Tanjavur, is a courtyard which is being built in the setbacks of two different buildings. So even such space can be used for a stack effect, can be used as a courtyard. And the other image on the which represents Karikudi, Tamil Nadu, where there's a pathway in between and courtyards shared. So that's actually a kitchen. So how courtyards have been shared with kitchen spaces. And the third image that talks about Atimanjeri at Tirutani, there's a courtyard at the very corner to give lighting to the entire space. If you can see, that particular building just had doors and did not have any windows. Only the courtyard was the source of light. So it says that windows are also going to bring lots of heat into the building, and they had the daylighting only to the courtyards. And that is one example. And the fourth image talks about Nagapattinam. And as we all know, it's a pretty high cyclonic zone near the coast, and people did not have open courtyards. They had stack effect happening through ventilators that were above 12 to 14 feet high. So these kind of courtyards also tells us how to design, in a way that suits the climate. So sustainable architecture is also about, understanding the climate and working with the design as well. So this is an interesting example that I found, and the first one is, that is talking about the streetscape. We all actually read about Western standards and anthropometry or urban principles that talk about having windows in the street. That gives a social security, or a kind of secured space for the street to be dwelled. But then we've already had that. We have never had, a partition between or compound walls that separated streets from houses. So that kind of connectivity is always there. And we've always had usage of spaces on the floor. Very minimally furnitures were used. So they had their windows on the floors where, they can get good breeze. So it's always only when we use the furniture, when we raise the window according to Western standards to 3.5 feet, we actually bring in, the other furnitures or, usage of spaces to be done that way. And the other images talks about, having very less asphalt on the roads. So this talks about Christopher Alexander principle. I just found this in Tamil Nadu. So wherever they wanted, wherever there is vehicular movement, they had, getting paved. The other areas are completely open. So this also tends to talk about the definition of an open space. We think paving it, closing it, and just leaving it open is an open space. No, leaving it as natural as possible is also, is the actual definition of an open space. Water has to percolate well. Water has to, there should be soil for it. There should be, breathability of the material happening. So this is one example of that. And so when we talk about architecture, it's not just about the buildings. It is also about the water management, the watershed management. So this is an example that I found in Ramanathapuram. It's a small village called Abhiramam. And if you can see, the Google map has been marked with the Kanmai, which is a water body. And the entire, as we all know, Ramanathapuram is a very dry district. There's a small village, if you can see, called Abhiramam. So the entire village is being supported by this Kanmai. So how well watershed management is being planned for a dry district in Tamil Nadu. But now, even when we get lots of rainfall, enough amount of rainfall, there's no water being stored or utilized properly, be it rainwater or the, the fresh water source, the wells or the bore wells. So this is another example that I would like to take from the planning principles of, of our state. So now let's see a small example of how we took ourselves into a project. And this was the first project that we did, and it was in the rural area of Tirutani, in a village called Athimanjeri. So it's a very dry area. The temperature is extremely high in summers as well as winters. And you can see the mountainscape. That's exactly where the site was. It was studded with mountains on all sides. So before getting into the project, this aspect of site study was very important. We actually think of, understanding the local materials, local buildings, because there are lots of differences between understanding, from the local as well as learning it theoretically. We all would have, read about random rubble foundation, or which has been built using lime or cement mortar. But here people built it with soil, just soil. Or some people did not even use soil. They just interlocked it so well that it was, at its proper neutral axis, gaining the strength. So lots of examples that we can take and understand. This is an exploration for us, as well. So, and the soil that is in, completely different from, each and every place. So the kind of clay, silt, sand proportion in the earth, the lots of lime, silica that acts and tends to, hold the soil together. For example, if you can see, this hut is been around 15 years old. It's not plastered. It's just carved. There's no lime stabilization. It is holding very good because of the lime already in the soil. So the understanding that people had with the soil condition helped us to improve our knowledge and wisdom on sustainable architecture. So this is a very simple plan. The southern part of the building was completely protected with a veranda, which is blue in color. There was a small living along with a kitchen dining space. It was a combination. We did not want to separate. So it was a family activity that was going on there. And there are 2 yellow spaces marked, which is used for sleeping. And there's a common toilet and a bath area. So the toilet system that was used was dry toilet. So let's come to that again. So the foundation here was done with random rubble. An old building was demolished and we just got the stones from them. We reused the stones for the foundation. And sometimes we understood that drawings, when we do it theoretically, or, doesn't work there, because the size of the stone all depends upon the foundation drawing, all depends upon the height of the foundation, the plinth level and things like that. So that's one thing. And here the interlocking was done very, very properly by the local artisans, and it was completely filled only with earth. So I mean, earth is lower than the subsoil. So the term earth here, I mean it for the soil or the mud that is below the subsoil. So which does not have any organic matter. So it's been pugged well, fermented well, so that the soil particles are loose enough to bind the stones together. So it's just used for filling in between the gaps, whereas the complete stability of the foundation is based on the interlocking technique. So this is for the plinth. We've used coarse rubble, and that is to raise the building. Since it is a very high terrain, we do not have to raise the building for more than 2.5 feet. And that is also because to stop the conductivity of water from the ground level, because we are planning for mud walls. The wall system is a combination of adobe and burnt bricks. Why so? Because lime is not a local material here. We did not want to extensively use lime, bring it from a different place. So plastering was really difficult, in this part. So we thought of doing an exposed brickwork on the outer side with burnt brick, and a combination of adobe, on the inner side, where it can be plastered with either mud or cow dung, or or a different material other than lime. So this is what we've planned, and it is a 1.5 feet thick wall, and it works by interlocking method. So both the materials, we made sure there is proper interlocking and interwoven that is done, so that the two materials doesn't separate with each other. And one important thing to be noted is the compression, or of a sun-dried brick is completely different from that of burnt brick. And little difference we found. For example, you make a brick adobe of size 9 inch by 4.5 and 3, and you allow to dry it, it shrinks to 1 inch on all sides. So that was one important learning, that that we learned how the material differs, when it is being interwoven and things like that. So you can see the images, and all the materials were locally procured. So the blocks, as in the adobe, was also made in the site itself with a soil got from a nearby farm, just 300 meters away. And to talk about the doors, windows, all the wooden part of the building, they were all reclaimed. We were not planning to go for anything that was new wood, because in today's condition, the new wood are completely tender. They are not grown trees. They are less than 10 to 15 years of age. They have been cut, and not seasoned. So in a mud building, it is very difficult to install such a wooden member. It is difficult, as well as in a concrete building, there will be lots of expansions according to seasons. So it is good that we use a very strong country wood, which is reclaimed as well. So the life of wood is completely high, is really high comparatively to that of the building. So all the doors, windows we've installed is of country wood, which is which was procured from an old building that was demolished. And the mortar for the wall system was again mud mortar stabilized with lime. And for the treatment, this treatment process, we actually scraped out the paint that was there, and we treated with cashew shell oil and linseed oil. Cashew shell oil on the sides of the frames where it touches the wall, because it's highly corrosive in nature, and it really protects the wood from termites and borers. Whereas the other part of the wooden structure with linseed oil, which can make it waterproof, and also help to prevent from termites. So these, we actually do not advise any volatile organic compounded paints, varnishes inside the building as well. So there was a research paper that was done by IIT Madras that talks about how bad the indoor pollution in Chennai is comparatively to that of the outdoor pollution, because of the paints that we use, the vitrified materials, the MDF boards, all the PVC materials, and all these things. They keep on releasing aldehydes, some like formaldehyde, that is there in the air, and you keep a room closed. It's really difficult, and it's a kind of condition that leads to various various conditions like sick building syndrome, and there have been lots of studies about that. So we actually do not get into VOCs also. Yeah, and these are small parts of the building that can explain you how it was coming up. We made sure there are there are inbuilt furnitures, window seats that can help in minimalize the furniture inside the building. So that's one part of it. Most of the shelvings were inbuilt. Since it's a 1.5 thick wall, it was easy to do that. And we also had provisions for gray water and black water, treating them and using it. And the most important aspect of a sustainable building is also planning. Here, the building cannot be, where you can cut and paste, or, where you can make alterations on walls or on the load-bearing structure. So we will have to plan accordingly and then work on this. So this is about the procurement of the roof, procurement of the wood for the roof. So we plan to go for a complete pan tile roof. The reason is no Madras size roof or any other roofing technique with lime, because lime was not there. So a slope roof would be better because it's extremely hot in summers, around 45 degrees Celsius. So we plan to go for the local wood, which was Ildupai and palm. So what's the difference between country wood or teak, or why is it always we consider teak to be one of the strongest wood? No, like there are seven, basically the wood or the quality of wood is chosen to make sure that it is not affected by any insects, termites, or borers. So there are 800 species of termites available in Tamil Nadu. So every context has its own species, and only the particular tree of that particular context will be resistant to the termites of that particular area. So it's always better to choose and use a local tree, a local country wood, rather than going for teak, or that we've already seen where country woods have supported very completely better than teak or Burma teak and things like that. So, and to talk about the pan tiles, yes, we've used completely reclaimed ones. We were able to source out. There were also new manufacturers or new people who could do these tiles, but since we got it, we've reused them again. And this is an interesting topic about Palmyra rafters, which is palm tree. We've used rafters out of palm wood. So if you can see, the portion that's marked in the tree called as pith is usually the portion which is used for, which is used as wood in the other trees, whereas in the palm tree, it's just the opposite. Only the hardwood, which is mentioned here, is used, the black portion of it, and the pith is not used. So that's when we actually get to cut that particular region. So the older the tree is, the hardwood becomes thicker enough. So we've seen where the pith is only 2 to 3 inches, even where the xylem conductivity is completely lost, and probably the tree is in a stage where it's going to die. So that's when actually a palm tree is harvested and used. So there was lots of understanding about the materials that we got to know from the local people. Yeah, so this is about the palm wood. So this is an example to show you how it's very effective or very comfortable in working with local artisans, and most of the materials we've used were involving lots of artisans and not machineries. Even the wood procurement, the scraping of the pith becomes easy when we do it with an artisan, because he knows to remove just the pith and not the hardwood. So in a machine, it is not, it cuts out evenly, and there are also chances where the hardwood might be cut through. So if you can see, the wood is not equal. It cannot be equal, because we are just trying to remove the pith, and we are not planning to touch the hardwood. So that's the actual fibers. We are not actually disturbing the structural property of a wood on the hardwood side. So this was when we got when we were installing the rafters. And interestingly, most of our projects, we actually have clients working with us. That's something that we actually like to do. It's been more of an exploration for the family as well. So this is about how the central beam supports the rafters. So and you can see how they've been joined together, and also the important property of not allowing the main beam to touch the brickwork, which has the mud mortar. So that's to protect the wood. And here we've been using a small tin sheet. We did not have the knowledge of using any other material at that time, and now we actually have other natural materials, leaves of teak leaves, leaves of banana, that actually helps to keep the wood intact So that was also used in olden days to protect, to protect the beam when it comes in touch with the structure. And regarding the inner part, since it did not have a courtyard, since we had limited amount of windows to make sure that there is not, much heat into the building, we've plastered it and gave a line wash for it. The plastering was done with cow dung, and we've line washed it. You can see how well the family responded, and they were also part of doing. And the complete flooring was with clay tiles, which was again locally made, with hand. So that was again not a manufactured material. So it had little undulations. Yes, the family was okay with that as well. So this is the complete structure. So you can also see there are openings above 14 feet. That's to make sure the hot air leaves the building. So this is not just in a sustainable building. Any building should have such an opening for the hot air to leave. So stack effect, cross ventilation are all, a part of the planning principle as well. And yeah, so this is the front part. So it was a self-sustainable building because it works on its own energy. We've installed solar panels, and there is nothing like we have sourcing energy since it's at a farm. That's how it works. So you can see the main door, which is being treated with linseed oil, and the other parts of the pillars, which is again reclaimed, and the window seats, how we actually plan to use it to reduce the furniture, and most of the shelvings are all inbuilt. So this is the inner part of the living area and the kitchen, where it is a combination of living, kitchen, and dining together. So mostly Thinnai, was installed near the window spaces, and yeah, so this was in the daytime without any lighting. So to talk about the waste management, the client and the family was really supportive to go in for dry toilets. A dry toilet is nothing where you don't use water for flushing. So here in Tirthani, there's lots of water scarcity, and to dig a borewell, you need to reach around 300-350 feet. So this is like a common, depth that people go in the villages. So now we've, thought of doing this, and where your fecal matter and your urine is collected and is being used in the farm, after decomposition process. So there's this black bucket, which you can see, which will be filled with sawdust. And once you use, you just have to sprinkle that. And there's no smell. There is no attack of any termites or, attack of insects, because usually when there's a fecal matter, there'll be lots of other organisms getting attracted. So you don't find anything as well. So this was, since this has been 2 years, 2.5 years, I think it's been successfully growing. And this is also one of the techniques that was used, in the olden days. So this is about that project. And to give a small comparison about a project that we worked on in Chennai, a comparison of a rural and an urban area. So I could not call it completely urban. It's a very urban space as well. So inside Chennai. So again, here the plot was little tilted. It was not oriented towards north. But then we made sure that we oriented the building towards north, south, west, east, to get the prevailing wind direction as well, to make sure that we get enough sunlight for the building. And daylighting. So it was again a very small space, a living kitchen space, a small sleeping area along with the toilet, verandas on either sides to protect it from. And the area is completely dry, and it's a grassland. In Tamil, they call natural Nelo. So which means there's not big trees or, wind cut, what do I say? There's a lot of heat transformation from the land as well. Because of the soil condition itself. So that is the reason why we had to protect the space from veranda on either side, because it's completely hot. And here again, the foundation was reclaimed. We've used stones from a nearby compound wall, which is demolished, and we've reused it again. Again, mud mortar stabilized with lime was a part of this structure. And as you can see, there was proper interlocking, and the mud mortar is just a filling material between the gaps, and to make sure that an insect or nothing goes inside. It is just a packing material. So the structure itself works based on the interlocking technique only. And the wall system that we went here was rammed earth. So it was a 1 feet 3 inches wall. So it was stabilized with lime. So there are two different types of rammed earth. What I mean by rammed earth is nothing where you have a shutter. You just mix soil according to various proportion of clay, silt, sand, along with the stabilizer. Stabilizer is nothing but a binder. So we've used lime, and you ram it in such a way that it gets compressed well and reaches to its maximum compressive strength. So this is how it works. You can see there are waves on the walls. That is basically every layer which is getting compressed. So actually, there would be only 1 feet or around 9 inches of soil that will be put inside the shutter and compressed to around 3 to 4 inches. So this is how a rammed earth works. And the other kind of rammed earth wall, which has been evolved by various institutions like Auroville, which is stabilized with cement. But here we did not want to again bring in cement. So that's the reason why we thought we'll plaster the walls with lime and we'll go for an unstabilized, because stabilized with lime is not going to give you that kind of finish where you can leave the wall without plastering. So this is how it is actually compressed. So the soil is very dry. So you need very less amount of water. To say you just sprinkle some amount of water to make sure the line there is getting cured. So this is also one important point where a sustainable building needs very less water. So there's no curing process that is actually needed. And most of the materials tends to set naturally or by taking the moisture from air. So this is how a shutter of a rammed earth is actually. So you can see there are small gunny bags which are placed on the wall. We actually soak the gunny bags and we place it on top of the wall so that there is no cracks in the walls, because this was done in the summer, and we did not want what do I say? The sun, I mean, the water gets absorbed very easily, evaporated from the wall. So there might be, instant cracks. So to avoid that, we made sure that the top part of the building is completely covered with gunny bags, soaked with water. So this is an example. These buildings are not new to us or not an experimentation. They are time-tested ones. And this is an example which talks about a community being involved in constructing a mud building. So this is in Leh Ladakh, and you can see how how we've been through the process of sustainable construction or building with locally available materials. So this also talks about, how people actually have the knowledge of building with local materials, and how these manufactured materials or, new techniques are actually taking these skill sets from, the indigenous tribes and people of the particular context. And to talk about the roof of this building, it was done with Madras Terrace roof. So this is a roof that is completely, this is actually a flat terrace roof, where you don't want a slope structure or where you want a flat terrace. This was used because in the city there was lots of area constraint, and they wanted, terrace for growing and, other purposes. And what you can see is the small bricks being used. And it was completely done with lime mortar, Kadukai and Jaggery. Kadukai is Haritaki. So why this brick is because the compressive strength per square inch comparatively to that of a normal brick. Normal brick, I mean, is the burnt brick that we get in the market of 9 inch by 4, 4.5 by 3, which is actually little less comparatively to that of this brick, because when you burn a thicker one, the innermost core of the brick is not completely baked. Whereas in this brick, it's very thin, you can bake it easily. That's the reason why this brick retains, comparatively a larger compressive strength. And so this is called Kandikal or Chittikal in Tamil. And the Kadukai and the Jaggery is because, for the lime to get fermented and to get cured. So as I said, lime actually takes up lots of carbon dioxide from the air to become calcium carbonate, which because the state now which is used is calcium hydroxide. So to become that state, it needs lots of carbon dioxide, and the fermentation of Kadukai and bellam will actually help. And also it's for waterproofing. So the waterproofing for the complete terrace is going to be done with palm jaggery. A small example how this metastase roof, sticks and how it works. So if you can see here, the bricks are actually not soaked in water. So they take the water from the lime. So that's when they actually get the grip to stick. So the entire roofing was done only, only with using this method. So it was completely started and completed till the end only by sticking together. So also to talk about the artisans of the entire roofing technique, we actually involved around 29 to 30 artisans for the entire roof. So this eco-friendly construction or sustainable architecture also talks about supporting the local economy, supporting the skill sets of artisans, and spending cost on people and not on resources or scraping out resources. So that's one important aspect of this construction. And the front veranda was laid with pandite roof. So this is for the inner plaster. We've used lime plaster, hard, rough plaster, to be the first coat, and a lime punning, which is nothing but lime and sand grinded well to be the second coat, to get a smooth finish. So this was used for the inner part of the building. And the flooring technique was with lime oxide, and the colors were actually taken, from original oxides, and we've not planned, or we did not want to use any synthetic oxides. Mixed colors take synthetic pigments from anywhere. So traditional colors, red, yellow, and black were preferred, and it was completely hand polished. So to compare to that of granite flooring, which is getting polished with machines, here the complete polishing takes place only with hand, with coconut coir and coconut oil, and little amount of bee wax. So that's one important technique, important aspect of this technique. And also here you don't have the conductivity of cooling property into your feet. So most of the buildings, people who live in buildings with granite or marble flooring have the problem of ankle pain or knee pain, which is very common. People use slippers inside their places. It's all because of the conductivity that happens. Here these floorings are mostly warm, so that's also why one of the reasons why it actually supports your health. So this was the front, which is completely lime plastered and lime washed. So in a city, we did not have a response of going in for a dry toilet system. So it was not always acceptable to get in for a dry toilet. Here we made sure that the water from the kitchen as well as the black water was treated properly. The first part of the image where you can see is a process called where your gray water, that's your kitchen water, is getting treated with a species of plant called Kalvare or Canna. They actually eat up the soil, soap particles, and using aerobic reaction. And the other part is called twin leach pit system, where there's 2 leach pits kind of pit with jali walls, and there's lots of the soil is being is left undisturbed below, and every time the waste is in the soil, in the actually the bacteria in the soil helps to decompose the fecal matter. So this this kind of leach pit system also has some constraints, like the soil has to be airy, it has to have certain amount of bacteria for it to do. And also, most important thing, we are not supposed to use any kind of harsh disinfectants for all these things, because it's going to disturb the growth of bacteria, and the reaction or the aerobic digestion might not actually happen. So choosing to live in this building is also more to do with the lifestyle and choices of living as well. So this was another project that we did with compressed stabilized earth blocks. So most of the roofing part here was brick wall roof, and mud mortar was used for, and it was pointed with mud lime. So this is another example, to talk about how even G+1 structures contemporary, to get the mod look, can also be worked with sustainable architecture. So the green colored plaster that you see is with oxide and lime. So where you wanted to plaster a wall, yes, it can be done using natural stones. Handmade Athangudi tiles were used, and so this is about the flooring of the structure, and we make sure that there is lots of open to space, open to sky spaces, lots of daylighting to the building. That's one aspect of it. So this is another ongoing project. So this is completely with laterite, and so roofing systems are with brick walled and jack arch roofing. So where you can see the complete wall has been constructed with kandikal, and some parts of the courtyard to be used with random rubble stone and pointed with lime. So this is another example and an ongoing project. And these are some of the inner images, like where you can replace your waste concrete slab with cut stones or granite stones, Athangudi tiles for roof slabs. So there are a few examples. So the final question, so whenever we talk about such buildings, the final arrival process to the cost is one common question. Yes, these buildings are costlier, but not costlier in a way where it is going to destroy the ecology of a place, where it is going to destroy another person's livelihood, because we actually don't think about the relationship that we have with the environment, because we could actually relate when we went to the mining places, mining of limestone, be it granite, be it river sand mining. So when someone talks saying there's no water in the well, there's no underground water available for me for agriculture, it actually relates to the resources being depleted or exploited at a particular area. So most of the water crisis or water scarcity issues in Tamil Nadu is also because of complete exploitation and scraping out of resources. So we actually do not take those costs into mind. So we actually think only of paper money, but there are lots of cost factor that is involved in as well. But we are not the direct paying community. We are, there are other people who actually bear the cost of that also. So comparing that, conventional concrete construction, we actually spend 70% of cost for the materials. So only the 30% goes to the artisans, because lots of resources are used, whereas in sustainable construction, only 30% is used for materials, whereas the 70% is for the artisans who helps to bring in the structure. So that's the difference. And the final question is, like, in case if you're choosing, to build more sustainably, it's like we are saving lots of cost that has been taken or bared by other people, where or what do I say, it actually reduces the burden of other communities and dependencies of livelihood that is there on resources. So yeah, I'm done, and so this is all I had to tell. Probably a small exploration that we had for the last 2.5 years, and thanks a lot for for giving this opportunity to share, because it's a kind of motivation motivational aspect for us as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Kritika. Thanks for the insightful, thought-provoking, socially responsible lecture on the sustainable construction. So there are many questions online. So shall we move on to that?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, from the start. So there is one common question that has been asked. So wish to know the overall cost factor for each project and the overall a cost factor in such with respect to the sustainable construction asset. So this is one common question that has been asked by many. So can you respond on that? I think the last slide had spoken about that, told about that. So anyway, from your viewpoint.
Sure. So we work on bill of quantities because it's very difficult for us to work on square feet basis how a conventional construction works. So for the first building, which is with Pantave roof at Tirutani, it costed us around 16 lakhs for the entire project, and it was 1,100 square feet. So the cost was greatly reduced because it was a rural area, and the family supported us with construction. The other, and there was no transportation much of charges and all going to the building. Whereas the second building inside city, yes, there were lots of cost difference. It was only an 800 square feet structure, but it costed us around 19 lakhs. The difference was because lime was greatly used. Lime, yes, it is costly comparatively to that of cement, and the other part is also because of the transport toll permits. And we do not have proper storage for materials, space for storage, and we will have to take it in very small lots. That was costing us little high, and such practical difficulties was a little high. And third building with compressed stabilized earth block, that was even more costlier. The reason was because it was a G+1 story. The soil condition did not actually permit for a load bearing foundation, and then we had to support it with some tie beams. A little more geotechnical part of it getting involved. So there's also one important aspect of construction is choosing a proper site for construction. So in olden days, actually people chose where to build and where not to. That aspect of it, that was exactly appropriate in the first two sites, whereas in the third site it was not. So that's also one of the reasons why the cost was high. And I would also wanted to state that in today's scenario, if you wanted to construct a proper concrete building, I mean by all proper ratios without compromising on the quality of concrete, of the steel used in the building, reinforcement, of the fixtures, of the electrical lines, it would actually cost high. But then there are people who actually compromise and make sure that the concrete building is costing low as well. And we actually see, concrete buildings of late 1980s are way stronger than which is built today. That is because of the compromise that's happening. So I think when in that case, then it's not going to be really costly, or it's not going to be two-way high. And you cannot compromise on quality for a sustainable structure at all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, if the roof is covered like normal homes, what is the effect of rains on mud structure?
Sorry, ma'am, I did not hear you the last.
If the roof is covered like a normal home, what is the effect of rains on mud structure? So they're asking if you're using mud for the roof, so what is the effect of rain on it?
Yeah. So there's an old proverb that says that for a co-op building or any mud structure, you should have a very good hat and very good boots. So which means you protect the wall. Even if it's a mud wall, it's going to stay still. So probably not now. I have an image of a 150-year-old compound wall, which is built with mud. No stabilization with lime, no cement, and it's been standing there still. So it was done with rammed earth, and it is in a place called Thiruvidankod near Nagarkoil, border of Kerala, and it sees rains for almost 8 months. So it is the way that the technique is being applied. So yes, we don't make sure if it is not stabilized with lime or cement, it should not be, it is not appropriate to expose it to the weathering. If it's stabilized with lime, yes, it is. And there are also certain properties, like we don't find any mud building inside Tamil Nadu which is left unplastered. It's always plastered, and only the inner part of it is either raw finish or mud plastered. So understanding the material can help us work together.
Yeah, like you said. What is the maximum height of a rammed earth wall that can be constructed? What about the lintel part?
Regarding the height, to cut down the shear load, what we do is we do not go for more than 10 feet. So if in case of going for a higher roof of 14 feet, we have either a stone lintel in between to break the load. So that's one thing. And the thickness of the wall can also help in increasing the height. For example, I go for a 1.5 feet, 2 feet wall, you can actually raise it for 2 feet as well. You can raise it for 12 feet or 14 feet as well. And regarding the lintel, for rammed earth structure, it is done with stone lintels because arch is not possible. Introducing another burnt brick in between a rammed earth is again not, it's again not good because there's going to be different compressive strengths that are inside. And that's one thing. And in case of a normal Adobe Sunride, you can go for arches. You can for cobbled arch and any kind of arches would do.
So in the first project, I think so, the picture shown open electrical pipe. So can it be concealed? So why is it left open?
It was out open there because the current that we used there was a direct current. We did not go for an alternative current. The solar panels, we did not tend to tap the current, change to alternative and then use, because in that case, there's going to be lots of more batteries coming into the condition. So we did not want to do that. So it was completely direct and all the fittings fixtures were direct current. So in order to replace it or any repairing work, because it was new for us as well as for the client as well, we thought it is okay for us to leave it open. That's one thing. And since it was Adobe, we did not want to break the wall. So we actually don't break the wall for any purpose. In case if you want a concealed wiring, we take it through the wall. So the small pores that are left where the concealing can happen directly and plastering. So there is no way to disturb the structural property of a wall. Yeah.
Okay. So what in case if it is you're doing in an area where there is no need to change the alternating current? So in that case, will you be concealing it or how is it?
Yes, we've concealed it. The other two buildings that we showed you were all concealed only. So during the construction of the rammed earth wall, the pipelines are completely inside and then only the rammed earth wall comes up. So it's completely sealed inside.
Okay, so I would like to know how you communicate and convey your ideas to the local artisans. Also, how do you approach and hire them? So this is one question some student has asked.
So initially it was difficult because when we come up out of architecture with a degree, we always think that we know how to build, but actually we do not know. It is more to the masons and, it is lots of learning for us actually. So we listen to them, we understand what is it. We tell them what actually we want and they come up with the idea how to bring it on. So the process is not told by us. We only tell the end product. So the process is decided by them, their comfort zone. And sometimes there are better ideas from them where they say this will work, this will not work. And that is appropriately, been the right choice at that moment.
Architect Vasudevan has asked, do we have the manpower to do the Madras Terrace roof at Chennai?
Yes, sir. We do have. There are lots of people still practicing, still building their own homes with Madras Terrace roof in interior parts of Tamil Nadu. So the artisan team who came, to us was actually a third generation artisan team, part of Rajapalyam at Erode. Or most of the buildings, even in today's practice, people build with concrete, but then have a Madras Terrace roof. There are also people out there who still believe that these roofs are stronger and comparatively, the thermal difference is really high to that of a concrete slab. Here in a Madras Terrace roof, it's around 1 feet thick, and you can find at least 6 to 7 degrees Celsius difference in temperature from outside.
They've asked about, can you explain more on the proportion used for the toilet and bathroom flooring for waterproofing?
The waterproofing, we do a lime plaster. So basically, the waterproofing part of a lime plaster will come not just with the proportion, but with the workability. So the initial hard plaster will be in the ratio of 1:2 or 1:2.5. the ratio varies depending upon the quality and also the amount of slaking that the lime has gone. Slaking, I mean the amount of heat that the limestone has absorbed to get it slaked. So in Tamil, they call thalikradu. So how good the lime actually is. So then the second coat is with 1:1 ratio without grinding. And the third is again 1:1 with grinding. But the third is to work more on with the tools. The mason keeps working on the wall repetitively to make sure that every single pore in the lime is completely covered and it becomes waterproof. So the lime itself is a waterproof material. It is not going to absorb moisture. So that is one thing. But the more workability that you do, so the better finish, and you can get in a state where the water is not absorbed by the wall. Second thing, in some areas where we think we don't want to go for lime plaster because of not availability of lime, we go for small old tiles, being stuck on the wall. That is also one thing that we have done, where we get the ceramic tiles broken enough, we stick them on the wall to make it waterproof with lime. So where there is less workability and less mortar getting to the wall, that's one. And in one part of the structure, we've also done a stone wall. When we have lots of stones available, we make sure that the bathroom walls are built with stone. So the pipelines, of course, has to be outside. We cannot conceal the pipelines in that case.
Another question is, where do you get the skilled laborers like them? What is the labor cost? And would like to know the cost of building per square foot. What would be the life of the building?
Okay, there are more questions. Yeah, the first thing was like, where do I get the skilled artisans? We go search for the artisans actually. When we get a site, the first part of it is a site study. We sit there in the site for hours together to understand how it works. So you talk to local people, talk about seasons, talk about how the flood line is, talk about what are the changes that has happened in the last 10, 15 years. We talk about agriculture, we talk about what grows there, what doesn't grow, what kind of termites does it have, and all these things. We actually sit there, talk to the local people. The second part is like we go document an old building, that is for sure. Every building that we do newly, there would be a documentation of old building near to the context. It at least has to be around 100, 150 years old. That's one aspect of that. So we get to understand how the ventilation technique works, what kind of coater they've used, what material, and what kind of soil they've used, and other things. So, and third one is we roam actually to local materials. Like if there's a lime kiln there, of course there would be a lime mason as well. If there's no lime kiln, then we understand lime is coming from a different place. Then so it's almost we get to cover almost 4 to 5 villages to get artisans, and they would actually say they actually know like who can do this work, who cannot. They can relate and point out to people. So that kind of communication is still available inside Tamil Nadu. And the next question was about
what is the labor cost?
Labor cost. Yes, we pay them high. We think it is because of the skill sets that they have. So it's around 1,200 to 1,500 per day. We also take care of their food and travel expenses. I think it is something that the artisans should be, taken, because it's not just about the client, owner, architect relationship. It's more than that. We are actually trying to, imagine at one point when we lose them completely. I don't think this construction practice can happen. So it is a major dependency on them. I think it is also important to protect their dignity.
What would be the life of the building?
Life of the building, lime buildings are, are time tested, come for a time tested, what do I say, are more of time tested techniques. The old buildings that we see in and around Tamil Nadu are all out of lime. So why is it having a higher lifespan is because, as I said, the calcium carbonate, which is a fossil, becomes a limestone at one point of time. Whereas the curing time of concrete is only 28 days, whereas for lime it's 7 years. That's the reason. So once it hardens and sets, it's going to be there for lifetime. But then you have a certain amount of maintenance to be done. The lime washes that has to be done regularly for the building. The kind of pantile, roofing that has to be changed once in 25 to 30 years. Small maintenance are there, but then the old buildings, let's say the 150 or the Ripon building here in Chennai, they're all completely with line, the Madras test route that we see in the Central Railway Station. Any old buildings, they're all time tested ones, and they've been there for almost 150 years. But we are not able to find concrete buildings. The old buildings that was built in the early 1950s, 1945 in Mylapore are not, stable enough. They're getting converted to apartments. So we can see the difference between how, the building works.
What about the maintenance, the stains that happen on that, and the cost, availability of rectifying factors?
Yes, that is probably a crucial part in the structure, because in a village, when there's a problem with the structure, the family themselves knows how to handle it. So imagine there's a termite attack. They instantly know what has to be done. There's a tree that is, or a root that is being shown in the wall. They know how to handle it. But now we've lost it. It is little difficult, and people have to be little cautious about what is happening. At least what's happening around them. For example, there's another building which is coming up next to their plot, and what will be the how can that particular building affect our road bearing structure? How can the soil change? So what will be the disturbance that will be caused to the hard soil and things like that? That's a kind of little crucial factor that has to be taken care. Only when people talk about it more, talk about local buildings, about local techniques, that can develop.
Architect Pallavi has asked, what would you want to share your journey from a fresh graduate to a regional architect, and how you gain the knowledge in this area? This would help the students to have an idea for a way forward for the interested students.
Okay. So actually, we did not have any plans of starting a firm and working, but then I did not find a firm in Chennai to work on sustainable architecture. So it was either I had to go to Auroville or Bangalore, to work. But then since I had to come back to Chennai, that's when we actually thought of starting and working together in Chennai itself. So then we started writing about blogs, we started researching. Then we did a trip of around 45 days to all the old, villages of Tamil Nadu, to study, document about the techniques, to understand how the artisans work. So, we've documented around 300 buildings. So that was a photo documentation, not a complete documentation. That gave a larger picture of the, of these kind of constructions. And we actually got a confidence to start and work. That's when the first project actually happened through a friend. And then he was also interested. We thought of working together. There were lots of difficulties, challenges. Every part of the building was a learning process. Still now it is. So that's how it started, and it's been going through.
In rammed wall, which is line stabilized, how will we prevent dusting as it is not plastered?
When it is stabilized with cement, recommended by Auroville or Environmental Solutions, dusting doesn't happen because cement keeps it very intact. Whereas if it is being stabilized with lime, yes, dusting is for sure, and we plaster it. We plaster it with lime, and there's no dusting that happens in lime.
What are the other species of country woods which has the same strength as teak?
All well-grown mature trees. Iluppai, Vengai, Pillamaradu, Kongu, Vepamaram, all these are country woods. It is just that it has to be mature. It is just that it has to have the proper grit and proper grains. So pala, we've found all kind of palm, even coconut trees have been with proper grit have been used. It is just that they identify the proper fibers. It's called Vairam Panjamaro. So when you go and ask people, when you need such kind of wood, they actually take you to such trees or old wood.
Do all the clients who come to you are aware of sustainable architecture, or how do you convince them to take up the sustainable method?
Yes, there are lots of awareness that's going on. So people who wanted to have an eco-friendly home only comes to us. But then there's lots more because that goes from our side as well. We will have to make them understand because when people opt for eco-friendly construction, it is also the same kind of time, money, and finish that they expect in comparison to that of a concrete building, which is not right. They are two different extremes. They don't work that way. We actually try them, explain to them. We show our ongoing projects. We explain the entire set of difficulties, challenges, what they will go through as well, the entire project, and then it would be a commitment. I think transparency is very important here.
Thank you, Kritika. I think we are done with the questions and clarifications. Thank you. Now I invite Devani of 2A to propose the vote of thanks.
Greeting to one and all. On behalf of MSA JEA, I take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. At the outset, I extend a very hearty thanks to architect Kritika, who inspired us with their eco-friendly and sustainable exploration and experience. It gave deep insights into the topic and also released some interesting facts about the sustainable and regional construction techniques. The point where architect Kritika told us about the Madras terrace roof construction was really informative. I'm pretty sure that precious knowledge that she shared with us will definitely help in our design application and in future. Thank you, ma'am. I wish to express our gratitude to our management, dean, principal, HOD, and faculty members for organizing this lecture series. Our heartily thanks to all participants for your valuable attention and participation. With these warm words, we move to the end of today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Devani. I hope the webinar had given a better understanding of sustainable construction techniques and methods. So thank you, Kritika, once again, and thanks to participants for joining with us today. Have a great day, and I officially end the session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.